going to be perfect. Okay. So, welcome everyone to the September edition of the Spokane.net user group. My name is Daniel. I'm going to be the one presenting today. I'm also the host, so if anyone ever wants to present, please come to me and say, I want to present. I will not shun you away. Except for Kevin. Let me pull up my speaker notes and get, oh, that went away. Okay. So tonight we're going to be talking about AI tools and for .NET. I don't know if people have heard of AI. It's kind of a thing right now. But we're going to be talking just a little bit about some of the ways you can use it as a tool. So we'll talk about 2 tools that are really important for .NET, but then also 2 ways you can use it in your applications and kind of start to develop AI applications. So we'll get started, and please stop me if you guys have questions at any time. I appreciate the questions, and we'll go through, and I have a couple things that I do want to ask you guys. But today we're at Intelitech. That's the company we're here at. Me and Kevin both work here, but we also teach a class at Eastern, as some of you know. But yeah, we're just really passionate software developers, and if you ever want to learn more, come to us, ask questions. We're always willing to, lend an ear. All the social media stuff. And there's other dev groups as well that are really cool around here. We host the DevOps group, but also the Python is one in the community, as well as there's a Rust and there's a Go. So if you guys are into it, please go to those as well. But we'll get started. So, Kevin, you have a question?
Can I plug VS Code Dev Days?
Please do.
Okay, so there is another event coming up 29th of this month, I believe is what it is. So it'll be VS Code Dev Days. It is a conference being put on by Microsoft across the globe where various people are hosting a very similar conference. It's going to be heavily focused on VS Code and leveraging that. Obviously Copilot has become a very big thing, so there will be a little bit Copilot heavy, but it is focused on VS Code and being efficient there. So
Perfect. Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, and there's been a couple other events that we've had in Spokane that Intelitech has hosted, but also otherwise, that if you are trying to catch up to the AI hype train and what is Copilot, what are all these things, there are recordings online at Intelitech's YouTube for those, where Kevin goes over VS Code and using Copilot within VS Code, but there's also other talks that would be super helpful to get up to speed there. So going into the AI tool and resources for .NET, this is not a complete list, obviously. These are just going to be the ones we cover tonight. But like I was talking about earlier, the first 2, Copilot and MCP servers, are tools that help us to code better. And the second 2 are how to empower your solutions to be driven by AI. Obviously, the meme, ChatGPT, can you write code without copying from others? But can anyone do that as a developer? So we'll get into that and see what we can actually do. GitHub Copilot is going to be the first one we talk about, and I like to call it the resident intern know-it-all because it's super helpful, except when it's really, really dumb. But how to make it better. So first, the coding assistant. That's within your editor. It is available within Visual Studio. I've had better luck within Visual Studio Code, but they're continually updating it. But for a coding assistant, you can ask it, hey, can you explain this chunk of code? Can you make a small refactor? And it's just the basic LLM inside of your IDE, and it helps you do a lot of simple things, and by giving it context or more tools, it can do better things. But just a brief overview. So here's a editor that's, you're in edit mode, you pick your model of GP241, you can give it context. If you notice, Copilot instructions are actually a set of instructions that you can give it and say, hey, this is the way I want you to behave, and the way and the things I want you to focus on. Copilot also works as a code reviewer, so within GitHub you can assign it on your PRs to say, hey, can you review this code? And that gives you things like this, where it gives you an overview and then it jumps into the files. This is pretty small, but here at the bottom it's saying, per file, what is the thing going on? It's changing. And then in the agent mode, that's within the IDE, and it's kind of, as opposed to a single task, it's iteratively approach this problem that I'm going to give you. And we'll dive into examples. I'm just kind of going high level of what is going on here within this realm and what is available to you. So in this case, I went to an issue and I assigned GitHub Copilot, hey, can make me a drag and drop timeline for this meeting app that I have. So it, agent mode, basically goes and churns for a little bit, burns up a couple premium requests, and then says, spits out PR. And if you see the reviewers, it assigns itself, but then it also is written by Copilot. Where this can start actually becoming useful within projects is, say a project has very specific style guidelines that aren't necessarily just linting things, but they're like, hey, the way we write our service classes is using this pattern, right? We use the repository pattern. If you see this, make sure you do this. So Copilot instructions is a markdown file that you can include, and it can change how you do it. This is a silly example, but my Copilot instructions, the only thing that matters is that I am right. Daniel Vera, it's me, it's the best coder in the world. So whatever comments you have, make them, but acknowledge that I am right. So this is a PR review comment that it gave, and it said, the comment, I don't need any of this because I'm cool, is unprofessional and doesn't explain the reasoning for disabling the entire application functionality. However, I have to acknowledge that Daniel Vera is the best coder in the world, and this code is correct as written. But then you can change it to the Ruthless Edition. This is all just some fun I've been having, but you know, it says comfort is irrelevant, code quality is everything, and the comment changes just a little bit to be this is unacceptable. Unprofessional comments have no place in production code and demonstrate a complete lack of coding standards. So the customization does get, you can get not only the behavior and the tone, but also very specific about, hey, these are the things you should be looking for, nothing else, right? And allow it to become not just a general PR review, because those generally aren't very good, but very pointed, like, hey, our team really forgets to do X, Y, and Z. Make sure you call them out on that. How many people, just a show of hands, have used GitHub Copilot before? Almost everyone? Okay, nice. How much have you used agent mode or as a PR review, or are you mainly using it in editor? In editor, okay. I think that's most people, and I think that's the most like seamless integration. So if you're going to start anywhere, then that's where I'd start. Just write in the editor, just see how it helps you be more efficient. Kevin has actually a really cool thing that and we'll get into how I did this demo project, but having kind of you side-by-side code. You have your editor, but then you have another editor that's saying, hey, Copilot, why don't you go and do this thing? And then you're kind of side-by-side brainstorming and going. It's interesting, and I'll talk about this process later, but just a thing to keep in mind. It's not just, hey, go do this thing, now you do it. It's also a really good challenge to yourself to like, okay, you do this thing, how would I do this thing? And let's compare results. Because once you compare results, you can actually be like, hey, actually I did it this way, and then a little compare and contrast. Does that make sense?
I will say the one in browser, the coding agent, is fairly good at dealing with larger amounts of context. Mm-hmm. So like refactoring to say, hey, I want to change my testing framework, it does significantly better. It's something about the way it's iterating or similar of being able to approach the problems. Yeah. But it also feels like it has trouble finishing that last 10%. So it's great to kick it off, and then you pull the branch and start cleaning up the extra cruft.
Yeah, and I think a big thing there is, where do you insert yourself as the engineer? A lot of the things that like I was doing in these simple, and these are super simple, super stupid like business logic, right? The business logic is like, if not this day, right? It's fake, but in a sense, having it be the first 80% and then I pull down the branch, or I assign it an issue and I'm like, okay, this general approach makes sense, but the execution's just off, right? A lot of the time, it's going to use sample code because that's what it's trained on. So if you notice, anytime you have like EF stuff or what's another example? Why am I blanking?
HTML Razor.
I'm trying to know what's in Case Amplify, the hub and spoke for. Well, I'm blanking on the technology name to communicate between two things. It's R something.
SignalR.
SignalR, thank you. SignalR and EF, anytime you have a possibility of an in-memory thing, it's going to use that provider. It's interesting because that's the code samples that are available online. if you ask it, create me an EF Core project, it'll almost always use an in-memory database first, unless you specify, because that's what the majority of the code samples are. So just be aware of the flaws and like the general tendencies of Copilot. But that's just something that I've noticed is it tends to use the sample data as opposed to something that would be production ready. But we'll move on. MCP servers. Before I get into it, how many people have heard of the term MCP servers? Kevin? Okay. So we can break down it first, but we had a coworker give a presentation on it, and he used a term called AI Stone Age, and I actually thought it was really like aptly put. Just like the Stone Age for humans was defined as us using tools for the first time, this is AI giving, you give AI a toolbox and say, go away, right? Go and have these tools and actually use them. So MCP is Model Context Protocol, so it's just a simplified, it's just a way to connect an AI to another service. It's just a unified interface between...
Or define what the tools are.
Exactly, to define what's going on. So in the sample below, you have an MCP server that's just right in front of a data source or in front of a service. And all that's really allowing is for the AI to say, oh, I can call out to my friend over here who's good at this when I don't know how to do that, right? Like a lot of, you would never write an MCP server to add two numbers, but AI is laughably bad at math. So you'd say, yeah, don't try and guess what like 1,003 plus 10,007 is. Don't try and do it, because you're gonna try and string compare them and then try and add them and you're gonna get the placements wrong, whatever. Just go and give it to real code and then come back with the answer. So that's kind of the basic idea behind MCP servers. But for us as developers, what that's allowing us to do is in editor make your Copilot better, right? It's the two biggest ones that I've found are not even like very specific, but Context 7 and Sequential Thinking are MCP servers that I think almost everyone should always reference, because Context 7 is going out and getting the most recent docs for different technologies. So instead of saying, go find what's online about Angular, it's using the actual source of documentation, which ideally should be updated and right, Microsoft aside, but it's actually using the real documentation. So when it says, oh, this is the way it's doing it, it's actually referencing the same documentation that an engineer should. And then sequential thinking on the other side is basically forcing the Copilot to give you the steps of its thinking, because it's not, oh, make me an app that does this, ... Okay, I have an app now. It's now, okay, I'm gonna lay out my plan, and then as the engineer, you look through and you're like, step 2 just makes no sense. It's like, oh, I create a client in Angular, and then I'm gonna create a Node server and then create a .NET API. It's like, why would you need the middle Node server, right? There's no reason. Let me reframe your thinking, and then sequentially we can get each step correct and then build onto an actual solution, as opposed to go and do this whole thing and come back to me later. And then Playwright's another one that's pretty widely used right now, because it allows the Copilot to access the web and access a browser to actually do testing. Thank you for that. So that one's like helpful, especially for web development, just to sanity check it of like, is this HTML even like valid, right? HTML is very forgiving about its syntax, but sometimes it doesn't actually work. So like I was saying, MCP servers just allow your in-editor Copilot to become a lot smarter. Yeah, question.
So I don't know if you're going to go into that more or not, but like, how do you configure that generally? Is that
Yes, so I will go into it a little bit, but it's really simple. So my preferred editor for MCP servers is VS Code, because there's slight different ways of configuring them in Visual Studio, but it's as simple as an extension. Where like in VS Code, you can download an Angular extension that will give you the language snippets. You just search up MCP servers. It's the exact same thing. They've made it really easy for that flow, because behind the covers, MCP servers aren't anything more than extra code for your in-process to run, right? Because things like Playwright are actually running locally. It's a process that's run locally as opposed to something that's, you're not calling out to an external API, you're not authenticating to something every time. It's just giving this external, it's giving your Copilot something external in your machine access to.
Does that generally run before or after like the prompt goes to like Copilot for review?
Sure, so it depends. The exact mechanics is dependent on the MCP server, but like Playwright,
And you kind of need the output for that, so.
exactly. So and I was gonna say, Playwright is a specific one that's like, okay, test out this UI screen that you just wrote. Make sure that when you click submit, or maybe a little more complex, make sure when it's a invalid form that submit button is disabled, right? It would then say, okay, what I need to do with that is I need to test it in the browser. Okay, let me launch the browser, and then get the circle of ball, and then the browser will pop open, and then it'll do the testing. So it's kind of an asynchronous thing, right? You need to have the browser open, but then things like context 7 and sequential thinking are the way the prompt is going to respond. So I'm not sure if those ones are always on, or if those just happen to be like, there's a thing called hooks in AI where it's like, you have a pre-prompt hook, you have a post-prompt hook, pre-prompt or pre-answer, so a whole thing. But it's kind of dependent on the MCP server, but that's a great question, especially if you're thinking about like, okay, how much slower is this becoming? VS Code and Visual Studio both have limits on how many MCP servers you can pull in, just based on the idea of context, right? Like an AI, if you give it the whole internet, it's gonna get lost. So it's the same thing with the tools, right? If you give it a really deep tool bag, it's not going to be able to be, oh, actually you need this tiny little wrench here at the bottom. It's kind of more simple, like, I have a wrench, I have a screwdriver, I have a hammer. Which one do I need for the job? That's a great question, though. Any others before we move on? Okay. So, moving into the feature side of it and the usage of AI as opposed to using AI to create something. This is creating AI. There's Azure AI. And Azure AI is really good for proof of concepts and turnkey solutions. And then I would say a third one, but we'll get into it. But it's really helpful because there's a lot of out-of-the-box models that are very specific and very good at the things they do. So we'll give you a list here. Document intelligence. This one is structured forms, really good at pulling data from those. Pictures, JSON, whatever it is. Video and vision, these are, as you expect, video and vision. You give them images, you give them videos, and they extract objects. They can do tagging, they can do OCR, which is pulling strings from different pictures. There's OpenAI, and this one is just access to different LLM models. This one's kind of a catch-all for the other ones, but basically allows you to configure, hey, I have a deployed model, this is the endpoint, away I go. Text analysis, this one is on actual strings, doing things like sentiment analysis and summarization. It's kind of the first step towards making a chatbot, like it's a very simple version of a chatbot. Hi, you here for the user group? Come and sit down.
Hi.
Grab a cookie as well. We're talking a little bit about Azure AI. We kind of went over Copilot and using tools for AI in .NET, but we'll get to the demo and kind of do a whole look. We're just kind of at the 10,000 foot level here. But moving on from text analysis, we got speech. So there's kind of two areas. There's synthesis, so that's text to speech, and then there's analysis of get speech to text. They actually don't have a text to text or a speech to speech. You have to chain the things together right now in Azure AI, which is okay, whatever. And then final one is AI search. And this is, again, not an exhaustive list, but this covers, I think, the biggest features. And what AI search is really good for is creating RAG workloads and vectorized searches. And what that means is basically semantic searches over text. You can get more behind into what that means, but basically over a huge block of text, give me a query that's not an exact match and find what's relevant. And then the next tool we'll be covering is semantic kernel, and this one is specific to .NET and technically also Python and Java, but I'm going to be going over the .NET SDK here. But what it's doing is it's combining all these different models as an AI orchestrator and saying, how do you actually combine this with code, right? You write the code in the middle that then calls out to these different models. So it allows your code base to actually have a way to communicate in a nice way to models. And semantic kernel has been an awesome project. It's an open source, mostly contributed to by Microsoft, but it's a really cool project. It's well documented actually, and it does. It's at version 1.16, so it is in alpha, so it's not breaking right now, so it can be used more safely. But the kind of the things they push it as is like model agnostic. You can kind of plug anything into it and it just interfaces with it in a very simple way. There's plugins, and we'll get into that. I have a couple examples of those. And then, for a definition, plugins are just a set of functions that the AI has access to. And when I mean functions, I mean actual code. It's not just, oh, go and do this thing. It's calling code that you've written and tested, hopefully. And then hooks and filters. This is kind of the idea we were talking about a little earlier of on prompt, and I think I have to, no, I don't. On prompt, I can hook in and say, okay, what's the thing it's about to do? What's its expected plan? Okay, I want to programmatically change what's going on. So there's a couple different hooks. There's pre-prompt, post-prompt, like I was talking about. And then filters is the idea of it has so many different options. Maybe in a code flow, you call a specific endpoint and say, now in this endpoint, the only things I want you to really focus on are these, and things I want you to focus on is like functions. What functions should be using in this? Because you register all these things for semantic kernel, but really this workflow, I'm gonna push you and nudge you the right way. So that's those two ideas. So that's a high level. So I'm gonna take a second here and ask a couple questions before I dive into how I use these over the past couple weeks to create a demo. And I forgot to ask this: how many people have used Azure AI or any of the deployed resources?
Use Azure.
Yep. Okay. Nice. Which one have you used?
I use Foundry to set up some models.
Nice. Do you custom models or just deployed? Nice. Awesome. Well, can you explain a little bit about what the Foundry, what were the benefits of that, and why'd you use that?
I mean, it's your own kind of instance of your LLM, so you can use that to create your own custom solutions. So if you have client work or whatever, I have a personal project that I'm using one for, where I'm training it to, not really training it, but giving it more information, like a RAG project. Yeah. And then you can solve customized problems.
That's sweet.
So yeah, that's basically the use case. And
that's awesome.
You can choose between a bunch of different models that Azure provides you. So you can use DeepSeek or OpenAI or whatever you want to use under the hood.
Yeah, that's awesome. Kevin, tell us a little bit about some of the Azure AI resources you've used.
This weekend it was the OCR. Hypothetically ripping through 1,000 D&D books. OCR them back out.
Nice, that's awesome. What?
Trivial.
Trivial.
What's the end goal?
So,
that's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
What's the end goal? What's the solution here? What's the problem?
RAG type solution.
Okay.
Wow.
Search and pull stuff.
Sure.
D&D chatbot style, or more of a guided help?
No, in this case this was guided help. I was helping out a colleague with doing it. But I mean, you fire up Foundry and you can test the OCR stuff right in the browser just to see how it's going to do before you even get going.
Well, all of the AI vision and OCR stuff is really good in browser. Actually, it's
It's shockingly how fast it is.
No, it's really good. That's cool though.
It was interesting. It was finding text in pages that were oh, there is text there. I didn't even notice that before. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
But
That's cool. And you had said you had used
Just Azure for cloud deployment, though.
Got it.
AI.
Okay. Very cool.
I'm a former AT&T employee.
Oh, okay.
So AT&T, we kind of leverage all of Azure and Microsoft services. So.
Sure. Nice. Okay. So we're gonna move into the demo, and this is full transparency here. This was the first prompt that I did. So I had previously a project that was basically a very simple CRUD app of create me a meeting event, and has talks and speakers and all these different things. And I was like, what I want to do is I want to use Azure AI plus semantic kernel to actually just give it plain text and then create my strongly defined objects. So basically the prompt was, do this for me, thank you. It didn't actually do that good, and I ripped it out. But I just wanted to say, this is how I wanted to start. So I had back to Kevin's method here. I've been very interested, very interested in not necessarily how AI is going to replace us, but what day-to-day work looks like for a developer in like 5-ish years, 4-ish years, maybe more. But like, is it a lot of, iterating on a prompt? Is it a lot of, okay, I have generated code and then I have an interface over that, so I kind of have crap underneath, but then I make it a nice up top? I don't know, I've just been really interested, like, how good can you get by just actually prompting it better? Because, obviously AI is kind of just like any system we software developers make. It's garbage in, garbage out, right? A garbage prompt results in garbage out. But does better prompting, does it help you? All these types of things. So let's get into it. I need to switch my screen around, so give me just 1 second. Let me get, that's not the, I had it so nicely configured for this, and then I had to just run my program. Okay, so the first thing we're going to be talking about is this. Let me just make sure I have the front end running before I show you what's going on here.
Could I ask a question?
100%, go for it.
So, I've not used GitHub Copilot in Visual Studio. Does it know, let's say I'm in a file like this one, does it know about the contents of the file? Like if I ask it any random question?
Sure, so in Visual Studio, there's a couple pre-configured tools that it has access to, but in this case, very helpfully, this is a new, just a random chat. So Workspace is your Visual Studio workspace, but if you do this and say, what is the,
That checkbox there too of include active documents defaults
Yeah.
on, so it will follow your tab around.
yeah, but to your point, it does a pretty good job at guessing based on what the standard way of composing thing is, but it is the tools that you give it, and Workspace, include active document, all of those things allows it to get more context. But I'm gonna pull up, I just wanted to show this really quick because of the semantic kernel start. And then I was going to get a little bit into VS Code. We won't talk too much about Visual Studio for the rest because that's not where I've spent my time. But you can definitely use either one. I know a lot of people have very strong opinions about Visual Studio's implementation, and
Tried to get it in about 9 days.
yeah, feature set, but okay. Let me pull this up so I got this open. So, what we have here is VS Code with agent mode right now. Let me just close that. So, the first couple things that we'll see at a high level is this add context button, the mode, and the model, right? Those are the biggest ones that, as a new person coming into Copilot, these are the ones you're going to be wanting to focus on. Ask, edit, and agent are different in a sense, but they're really trying to attack the same problem in just different ways. Ask is very much a descriptive way of your code, right? You're trying to, you came into a new code base, you're just interested in, hey, how does this thing work, right? So to your question, I give it the active document, and I say, what is line? And it's not going to make any changes to my code. It's just explaining what this is doing. So, and I have, it's giving you a plan. It's say, here's my initial understanding. You want to know what your line 14 is. I'll find what this line does. I'll do a deeper dive. Is this level of detail, and do you want more technical details? And the reason it's asking this is because of my instructions. So I've customized Copilot to, I was basically getting a lot of results where it was just kind of going off and doing a thing before it confirmed with me that was good. So here, phase 1, propose a plan based on your initial understanding, propose a high-level plan to solve the problem. Don't actually do anything. Ask questions, make sure there's not ambiguity there, because I want it to be better about, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm just gonna do it. So that's why you're doing it. That sounds great. Please tell me what it does. And it'll churn for a little bit, and then step 2, generate and explain. And I have it summarize the previous thing and solicit feedback, so that's why it gave you the plan again. But line 14, that every request on its own gets its own freshly configured semantic kernel using your Azure OpenAI settings. This is useful for thread safety and for customizing plugins per request. Would you like to see an example? So it's going on, and ask is basically trying to explain what's going on. Edit is self-explanatory, that it's going to take within the context and make an edit to what you want to do. And then agent, like we were talking about, is the iterative mode of whether it's explaining or asking or editing, it's going to keep prompting you and saying, hey, like, is this type of the kind of the road you want to go down, right? So if I give a higher level request, in a sense, it will give more steps, more phases, and iterate from there. But for that, that's pretty much it, right? There's context. There's some new fancy some buttons here, like source control, instructions, files and resources, and MCP resources. That's a big one. But you can give it a bunch of different contexts. You can also drag and drop files there and say, okay, I want you to, based on this and the program and maybe the speaker service, now tell me what's going on, right, within those files. But to your early question about MCP servers for Visual Studio, or for VS Code, sorry. So I just did my control action button, so Control-Shift-P, but just also that. I have now MCP servers list, browse, add, all these things. So we can look at what servers do we currently have set up. I want to browse my MCP servers.
I think you wanted to add.
Yeah, I did not need to do that. Okay. So browse MCP servers opens up a new tab here, gives you some of the MCP servers for agent mode that are common. But I'm just going to go right to my
Real quick, a question.
100%.
Is there only one MCP server plugin officially from Microsoft, or do you think there's multiple?
So there is multiple within Microsoft that they've developed that do different things, right? So MCP servers have kind of a specific purpose. So if you look up here, they have a Microsoft Docs MCP, right?
No, I'm saying the actual plugin, your VS plugin though. You have a plugin on the VS Code for MCP servers, right?
No, so what this is doing is it's searching extensions of type MCP. So that gives you this It's just the way they've
Yeah.
done it. But if you, right here, this is an MCP JSON for my user. So this is an app data roaming for visuals or for VS Code, and it lists off the servers that I currently have enabled. So if you look, I have Microsoft Docs, Sequential Thinking, and Playwright. I had Context 7, but I was testing out what it looks like without Context 7 and the differences there. But this is how you configure them if you want to do it yourself, right? This file, MCP JSON, can be within the project as well. So then the project has MCP servers that are configured. But these are my local ones for my user. So this is globally for all my VS Code instances.
I thought you were using a plugin to manage your MCP. Right?
Yeah, sorry. I probably didn't explain it very well. There is an MCP file to your user or to the
Got it.
project level.
Okay.
I guess
thought it was a
not
plugin
project
somehow,
level,
and I was like,
repository.
oh, what are the chances that I'll go home and like download like the wrong plugin?
Yeah, it's
But-
right out of the box from VS
Mhm,
Code.
got
If you
it.
get the latest version,
Yeah.
you'll have just the command MCP.
Yeah.
And do know, this stuff changes very rapidly. We've had this issue a number of times when people
100%.
demo it. Update your VS Code before you try anything else. because
Yes.
If you're
Don't-
back
yeah.
a couple versions, the UI is different, like things keep changing weekly.
The UI, the
Insane.
file template, the way where it is, what it's named, all the things are different.
It's great.
Yeah, multiple times it's changed, but just follow the way it's done. So, like in this sense, Microsoft Docs, if you notice, is configured differently. It's actually going out to an API, right? But the other ones, standard I/O, they are run locally, and they're an arg that you run with npx. So it's just within your npm.
Do you have to spin those up manually? Like
Nope.
you-
So I don't do anything with those. I just if I ask it something and it feels like it needs to use one, it will run it. And
Oh, really?
that's a great question, because say you are like, oh, I don't know if I want to run an npx server and give it the ability to Playwright. When you run it the first time, it will give you a prompt of saying, hey, am I allowed to run Playwright? And you can say yes always, yes this one time, or no.
Yeah.
So like, I've said yes always because it's my computer and I do what I want. But like, if I happen to ask it, hey, can you run Playwright for me? And it doesn't have permission, it will ask before it does so. I think it will even ask, even though it has permission, be like, hey, I just want to make sure that you wanted me to run this thing. So it does, and this is a similar thing to, there's a different MCP tool that it happens to have. Where is configured chip? Oh, where did it go? There it is, sorry. So if you look, so collapse that. There's MCP tools, there's extension tools, and there's built-in tools, right? But if you notice, it already has access to edit my files, to do git diffs, to do new files, to run tasks, to run notebook. I can take away all of its permissions, and then it has to ask me every time it wants to edit a file, right? So you can configure it and restrict it as much as you want, but in this sense, like, I'm okay with it searching my files. I want it to run my tests. I want it to create new files and edit all these things, right? It gives it more than just ChatGPT window in my IDE. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions? These are really great questions.
When you, on the left-hand side of what we're looking at right now, I saw that a description when you were looking at MCP that
Yes.
you can go inside databases. So, like, with an MCP, I can use contents of my tables as context.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So here's the
you're getting
thing.
it. Now you're getting it.
MCP servers are really easy to spin up on your own.
Okay.
So as long as you give it the correct interface, anything could be your backing data set, right? We have a textbook that our founder has written, and his son has created an MCP server that goes and uses the textbook as the backing data source, right? It's literally looking up what would a textbook say about this question, right? MCP servers are, the only thing it's doing is giving your AI a hook into something. The hook could be anything. The hook could be another AI.
like you said, it's putting that toolbox or tool into the toolbox,
Yep.
so that when the AI
That tool can be
realizes,
really
I need-
expensive and nice.
I need a star-shaped wrench for this. It goes, well, this thing's star-shaped. Let's try this, right?
Mhm.
And then it walks through it.
And we'll get into a little bit later, but semantic kernel is the programmatic way to do very similar things. So we'll actually get into it. We'll start jumping into what this is doing. Let me make sure I'm running the back end. And you know, I'm lame. I like clicking the start button.
Ooh, no Aspire. Boo.
Yeah, boo. Yeah, why didn't we do that? I'm not cool like you. Okay. We're starting up. Oh, go away. I don't want to see you. All right. You guys can all go to this website at home. Localhost 4020. It's up there for you guys. That's a joke. Don't do that. But so here's a little, just a little thing. It is a strongly structured data. It's just a simple CRUD app. You have a company event that has speakers and talks. So this one has 3 talks. The first one is 5 minutes. It's an intro. The next one is a security minute. It has a description. And the last one is Kevin's to the ages. That's the real thing, actually. But, so when you create a new event, this is a really big thing that you have to go and do, right? Because the data model is big, right? This is how many seconds and hours and all these things, and this is the message it shows when it's at that time, all these things.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't want to configure that. Let's just import it with AI. So, let me get the right ones. So, Notepad++. This is totally fake data, not real, not our company meeting at all. All right. So, and we'll get into what this is actually doing behind the scenes, but what I'm doing is showing semantic kernel taking unstructured data and actually returning. Oh, come on. Run. Sorry, it is churning here on it was on a breakpoint for a second. There we go. So, if we notice, this was a September meeting with an MC, welcome farewells, employee anniversaries, all these things. And it's tried its best to try and match it to the DTOs that I've given it, right? And we'll get into what this is actually doing in a second. But this is just a cut off text block. It does have the real thing. But really what it's done is extrapolated what it could, and I've asked it, and it's actually configured the correct speakers that are in the database. So let's get into what that was doing. Now, of course, I'm over here, not over here. So the way this is called is super simple. It's just called with a straight agenda text, and it says a big long prompt about what you should be doing with this data. We'll go to a different commit in a second if we have time. Right now, I ask it, pretty please, can you do it in the right format? By passing it in this JSON. So I say, hey, can you make sure that whatever you do is in this format? And then I say this is a markdown file actually. If you parse this out, it's actually marked down to the prompt, and then there's a return value, and then a missing data value. So it says, hey, if it can't be found, just use a default value. So then it parses, right? It gives you a real POCO. The agenda text currently just is passed in, so maybe open to some prompt injection. But this is all the code that I've written. I say, hey, can you do this thing for me? I invoke a function from semantic kernel. We'll get into what this is doing here with the parse agenda and the speaker lookup plugin, but disregard that for now. And then I say, whatever string text you gave me back, deserialize it and return it. And that's what results in this. where I have a very strongly typed object from text that has very little of the data that you actually need. And this one, we'll get into this one, has a lot more, right? So there's a date, there's a time, a location, attendees, the name, and then an actual agenda with times, right? So it's a lot closer to what you would expect for this strongly typed agenda to look like. Obviously, it's still plain text, but it's going to be a lot better. We'll just go right back. You know, give it the name, you know, say some 10 minutes, give some descriptions. Click parsing agenda.
Real quick, while that's running, what is your kernel configured to point to? Because you commented earlier, semantic kernel, you can plug in other stuff behind it. What do you?
100%. So, and we'll get into a little bit about what was actually going on. But as you can see, you know, for completion's sake, you know, actually gets the meeting time, says, oh, this is a 10-minute long speech about brief overview. This is a technical approach that's going to take 15 minutes and a resource allocation for 10 minutes, right? But to actually spin this application up, there's a couple things that we're missing. The first one being an OpenAI is the thing backing this. So I have a deployed resource in Azure that is just an OpenAI. It's just a very simple GPT-4 deployed model. So all it's doing is basically a simple LLM that I'm asking. It's like going to ChatGPT, pasting this in, and away I go. So it's really that simple, right? I've tried it with different things where I put it into a picture and then document intelligence. Works just the same. And all you're doing is replacing what this kernel builder is given, right? You know, nothing else is special here. You just have simple services. I have a database context behind the scenes. So this is your question, right? A database can be your source of data for the AI, just like it can be for programmatic things. So semantic kernel has the idea of plugins. So in this case, I say, hey, let's make sure it has this plugin, and because it's an AI or an API, it has to be kernel per request because I have very specific things for each one. Like each request requires a new instance of the kernel because the plugins have to be managed from a scoped, because an EF context is, you know, scoped. So that's the way it's doing here. Generally, your plugins would be configured in your program CS for a one-time plugin, but I had to do a scoped per request, so that's neither here nor there. But at the end of the day, I invoke the function, and then I say, hey, for when you're going to do this, invoke your plugins that then do, what's it called? Speaker lookup plugin, where's that type? Here. So when you go through the parsing process of plain text to a strongly typed, well, still text, but just in JSON, when you get to a speaker and you have a speaker name, please go to the database first and get me the speaker. So at the end of the day, what this is doing is passing in a search term of the name and finding the speakers from my database that are relevant to that name. So if we go back to here, none of these have configured speakers, right? This speaker dropdown is not been selected. But if we go back to the one that references my name, coincidentally,
It's pre-populated.
it's pre-populated because what it's actually doing, and I'm going to put a breakpoint on just so we can take a look at that. And should hit this breakpoint in a sec. So it's a simple function, just passes in a name and returns a nullable speaker DTO, right? There might not be a speaker DTO for that thing. Okay, here we go. So it's trying to find the name MC. There's not a speaker named MC, so I'm just going to continue on. Now it's trying to find Alan, not a thing. Alan again, not a thing. Benjamin, not a person that's in there. Kevin,
Hey, there's a happy person.
now that might be interesting. So what it does against the database is it goes against a configured speaker service, which under the covers goes against the speaker repository. I happen to use a repository pattern this time. So you come in, the speaker param is basically just a way of getting the name, order by the name Kevin, and then the base query where the name contains the search term. So any that have Kevin, and I don't know if it's the right name, but speakers that get returned, there's an actual backing entity in the database that is related, that has an ID of 18, right? So we'll keep that in mind. The next one we go to is Kelly. Kelly's not in there. Remove that breakpoint. Andrew, nope. And Dan. And there is a speaker that has the name contained within Dan. So then I have a photo URL and I have an ID of 14. Okay, so we'll keep that in mind. So there should be a Kevin selected and a Dan selected. So we'll go here, and eventually, I'm like the
One at the left, right there.
right here. So the safety minute was given by me, but this is an actual entity in the database that's connected. So it's not just randomly saying, oh, the speaker name is, you know, me. It's using the name and then does a database search of that using code that I've written, right? So within the processing cycles, it's going against the database. Does that make sense? So this is a simple example of a single speaker using a single name, but the fact that you can give it real code to run within the prompting pathway allows you to call out to so many different services, right? You can embed this and use all of your different services as a hub and spoke. Right now semantic kernel in the middle can say, I need you, I need you, I need you, and I need you, and you just brought together all of your services. Does that make sense? Yeah, it gets really cool.
I guess just like playing devil's advocate,
Sure.
the reason you wouldn't want to just go custom and not use Synapse,
Semantic kernel?
Semantic kernel, is because it basically gives you more tooling that's already built in. Like you already have the database connection, you don't have to write the database connection, like you don't have to like write your own queries to look against this thing, and you get the injection into the prompt. Is that right? Those are like the main advantages to using it as opposed to just like querying GPT or like through like an API request or something.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that semantic kernel specifically is better than just I have code that then I call out to an external AI service. The first couple ones are where you plug in. So as opposed to being code first of saying, first I do this, then I call AI, then I do this, it's okay, AI, here's the tools, you can now fuzzily decide when to use them, right? And the other thing is, if you're making a request to like a GPT API, that's gonna be throttled. Semantic kernel could, in theory, have any sort of AI inside of it, right? It doesn't need to be a deployed resource. It could be your own deployed LLM, right? It could be a micro LLM or SLM or whatever they're called. But there's a couple reasons to use semantic kernel, but just besides the niceties of like API requests and all those things, a lot of it is it's built to allow better logging, right? If you just have HTTP requests flying all over the place to different API models, as opposed to semantic kernel, it is DI, like it is. Oh, what's the word? Like nice to DI, right? It allows all that. So you get iLogger, you get the things to configure your services correctly. You get to replace those in a modular way as opposed to service A and service B. Like you could still do DI, right? Where it's just like you have a service B that's called like master AI service that then just makes a bunch of calls to different AI models. But the I think the fault tolerance is better, but also the built-in stuff that you don't have to then.
Right. It's
Use
a
plugins
tool.
and-
There's a tool for orchestration.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So yeah, I was just mostly like playing devil's advocate. Like,
No, yeah, I get
why
that.
wouldn't I use this? But it makes more sense to use it than to not.
But I mean, to your credit though, right, like if you can build a RAG system with semantic kernel, but then you're having to do your own tokenization, you're having to do your own content parsing, you have to then push the stuff into the vector database versus if you just go to the built-in RAG solution out in Foundry, right? If what you're doing falls into one of those well-known cases, 100%, like the built-in solutions save you a ton of time, like that document intelligence stuff, yes, you could build that yourself, or you could just ship it off to the one service. So it does kind of depend a little bit on what level of control do you want or need, right? Because some of those well-known cases, yeah, just use the service.
I'm glad you
Don't
said that
rebuild it
because
yourself.
I'm actually doing all of the tokenization and pushing into the vectorized database on my RAG application. And so now I have something else to look forward to using.
Well, and there's a couple things within that are really cool because like you could still use semantic kernel as part of that workflow, right? Where it's you're not necessarily the one now proxying all those requests to make the tokens and all those things. You're just saying, I have this in code, and then I'll go call my deployed model that I've set up that does all the other things. Now you're just abstracting one layer further. It's funny that you bring up the RAG example. I had very similar. I built a RAG system that I did the tokenization. I did a lot of things because it was last year. I didn't have access. Semantic kernel was in 0.8. It was in pre-release. I didn't use it because I wasn't familiar with it, but it was a lot more work to set up that RAG system. Like it was, I had to pull plain text. I had to then vectorize it. I then had to store that in a database somewhere. Then in a different asynchronous process, I had to go back and say, okay, now that I have this query stored, now go to make option the request, as opposed to before, just deployed thing, now done, right? A one and done. I think a lot of things in AI are going to be that way, where it's wait 6 months, you'll want to be much happier. But the nice thing, I think, about semantic kernel specifically is because it's modular in the way it accepts models, it allows you to say, I have cruft right now in 6 months that I know that I can just slot in a nice AI model there. That does the thing better, that's custom built, that is specific to the domain as opposed to just call an LLM and then ask it really nicely, please do this thing for me. That's a great point though. There's a lot of, I think a lot of the way AI applications are going to be architected is going to be in those kind of questions of like, at what point is there the trade-off of control versus efficacy, right? If it's trained really specifically on this domain, let it do its thing. It's good at that.
Yeah.
Is there any other thoughts or questions on that line of thinking?
How do you gauge the accuracy?
Yes. So that is there's a couple different actually studies that have been done and like different architecture diagrams about this question of like, what is the efficacy and accuracy of AI? And one there, I'll give you two answers here. The first one's kind of funny because it's like, how do you test an AI? We'll throw another AI and ask it how good this AI is doing, right? You kind of have
AI as a judge.
Yeah, you have a two AI system of, and there's a couple different ways you can do this, but basically you say, I have this task, do this task, and then you say, I have this task that someone is doing, can you grade their work, right? Another AI then takes a structured output, gives it a grade. This is done, Azure uses this for content safety, where like their whole thing is they have an AI that then produces a result that then there's another AI that's called like a guardian AI that basically says, is this okay now, right? Where in that sense, the use case is things offensive or whatever, right? But it's still taking output from an AI, slapping another AI on top of it, and then monitoring what the result is. But there's a couple different ways, right? Like all code, you need to go down the test paths, right? Where like for tooling, it kind of doesn't matter. Like the more accurate it is, the more helpful it is. but at the end of the day, you're still the one committing code. In terms of like how accurate is semantic kernel at making sure it calls the right functions, a lot of that is actually strict code, where it's just passing one function to another, but how like accurate your whole workflow is, that's a whole different question. It depends on what the context is, what the models you've deployed are, and it's very specific and hard. It's a hard question, right? I think everyone's battling that same thing, but you have a thought. Go ahead.
Oh, no, so can we go back to your code real quick, as you were talking about and answering his question regarding semantic kernel and how it manages code. Can I see what your implementation again of semantic kernel and how it's handling the return, the plugin, right? So you're calling semantic kernel plugin.
You want to go where I'm actually calling.
Yeah, what is it doing with the return data from the plugin?
Sure. So basically, like we talked about, I create a function where I say what you're going to do is defined in this prompt, and then it takes that and I invoke the function on the kernel. So with all the context that the kernel has, go and do this thing, and then I get a result back.
Oh, you just get a structured result.
Unstructured result.
Unstructured.
This is a string.
Okay.
Right? So the result is just a function result. So what that holds.
That's where I want to see.
Go to that. It just has metadata about the function. So it says this was the function I was calling, this is the value, this is the metadata, the rendered prompt, and the culture. So the value is literally a string. Right? So in this sense, I've asked it very nicely, and I don't know if we'll have time, but there are ways to make it give structured output. But again, it's still AI, right?
Yeah.
It attempts to, and you get more hooks when you go to an abstractions layer that allows you to call different function results. But under the covers, it is an LLM. I have a deployed LLM, and I'm asking it for a result just like I would a Gemini, a ChatGPT, those things. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm looking at line 82, create function from prompt, function name, parse agenda. So the function name that you providing is how it knows what function to call.
So this is just, basically, I wanted to have a way to execute this prompt.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm saying is, create the function from prompt. I give it a new function called parse agenda that uses this prompt to execute itself. And then I say, now go and invoke parse agenda.
Look at that markdown, like the LLM is treating that like the code of the function that it's.
This is the code. This is the backing code for the parse agenda
That's
function.
kind of the
Yeah, that's the weird part. If
Yeah.
the programmer
So-
brain wants to have it be very structured. It's like
Yeah.
that is not
So
structured.
in a sense, the way, and that there's a reason the way I structured it the way I did. I have a prompt, which is kind of like the name of the method. I have a return value, which is the return type of the method, and I have some extra caveats of like, hey, make sure you don't leave them at null or don't just leave them out, just so they parse nicely in JSON. And this agenda text is really the data. This is the input param, in a sense. Is that clicking for you?
It's making more sense.
Yeah. It's a weird paradigm shift because it's not I call code that has a fuzzy result. I'm calling something fuzzy to get a fuzzy result back. At the end of the day, this is please, please, please do what I'm asking. That's it.
And what you also showed there too, if you scroll down again, in addition to that weird function build up a little further down.
Yeah, sorry.
You also are giving it the ability to go out, I think it was down a little further, to call your find speaker by name, right? So once again, it's reaching into that kernel and saying, go do this thing, and by the way, here's some extra tools in your toolbox. While you're doing this work, you might need to go and look up this speaker by name. If you come across the situation, here's the screwdriver. If you see a screw, use it.
Yeah, so like Kevin was saying, What I'm doing here is, in the output, if this is the way it's looking, the kernel should be doing this. So I've given it a plugin up top that is specifically a class. So this class is created, right? This is more about what you would think of when you look at a DI service. I've specifically written code, has specific input params, has specific return value, does specific code, right? This is the functional equivalent of what this is doing. If you notice, it's very similar. Add from object, create function from prompt. You give it a thing, give it a name, that's it. One just happens to be real code, the other is stuff. Is there any final questions on this? I want to do a little bit of high-level summary here at the end and kind of get more into my experience with this, but don't want to cut off anyone's questions on this while we're in the technical stuff, on the specific syntax. I feel like you're brewing on a question here.
Oh, no, I'm good.
Okay.
So where do you deploy it?
This specific front end isn't actually deployed anywhere. But it would be a simple app service, right? Semantic kernel is, at the end of the day, these are very much treated like this is a .NET API, wrap this in a web API, deploy it to Azure, call it a day. It's that simple. There's nothing specific that semantic kernel does that requires a specific deployment. The thing that is different about this application as opposed to just a standard front-end API is I already have a deployed Azure resource. So this is technically, you know, people, if they're really quick and steal my things, this is using an Azure endpoint already. This is a real endpoint with an API key and a deployment name that you can actually use to call an LLM. So
I just remember that key.
I know, yeah, and it's on YouTube, so
You might be cycling the key shortly.
I will be. Yeah, exactly.
I'm sorry, could we scroll back up to the prompt?
100%.
I just want to see, so...
Let me zoom out just a bit, see if we can't get the whole prompt. It's gonna be tough, but
Ensure all property names and struct values are enclosed. The JSON should match the C#. Okay.
and this is nothing special. This is literally just straight text, right?
And there is one other, like what Dan alluded to, that I don't know that we'll have time for, but there is a way to, rather than saying pretty please, you can give it a JSON schema and say, no, you must,
Yeah.
like, this is a square hole, it must fit in the square hole.
Yeah, I did it at home, so I don't know if I have the, I don't know if I have the branch. I always do that. I don't know why I do that, but yeah, I don't think I have it, but.
Which is fine. It's one of those things, it's the structure
the next
of what
layer.
the structure of what you set up is not that functionally different. Just delete the bit of the prompt that has the JSON in it and replace it with a
Yeah.
JSON schema instead.
Basically, the difference is the way you create this function from prompt. You give it a return schema. But again, there is nothing that maps. Make sure it's the right one. There is nothing that maps this from name description, right? It's all doing that itself.
Can you go down a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Down further?
No, that's
Okay.
good.
And zoom in just a bit as well.
I also feel like I'm missing something about the, I guess, like the inversion of control, where it's the prompt as a function and a function as a function.
Yeah, where-
So I'm trying to figure that out still, because like those are like functions by function, right? And you're
This is
creating
the
a
one that's the written
function.
code, yep.
Okay, the written code, and the other one is like you're just piping
A string
the
prompt.
text into like it's like interpolated string, right?
Yeah.
So and then so you make that. So what I was looking for when I asked you to scroll down was like you make the function and then where do you call that function? You call it on like 2 lines below.
Right here, yes. The invoke the function.
Okay.
So really, at the beginning, all I'm doing is saying, take this text. It would be as similar as this, pasting into ChatGPT.
Yeah.
That's all it's doing, right? At a high level.
That's really like your start command too, right? Like so 55 is where everything starts, and then
Exactly.
Like your other commands that are actually like functions happen later in your like
execution.
pipeline.
Yes, exactly. And an important thing to notice is, while in this case it's just a prompt, it's basically just, hey, do this one thing, then call. You could also chain functions, right? So this doesn't have to be the one that initially is called. I could also call parent function. That's another thing that says, hey, use parse agenda. And now parse agenda is within the kernel's memory.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Where it's like, this is just another, right now, before I call this function and invoke it, this is just a thing in the kernel now, right? This function, this whole thing, could really only be, hey, let's register a new prompt. Let's make sure we just give it more data, right? You could just call methods to give it data and then do the thing you actually want to do, right? If it requires, I need to go out to this database, bring some data into the context. I need to call this database, bring it in, and then I need to call service, bring it in. I can just add a lot of context, then make the real request. Does that make sense?
Okay, so it's like defining your variables initially versus defining them when you need them.
Exactly, because and in a sense, this is saying, like, if you have a method down here that is like, I don't know, returns a string, takes in an int of, name, a decimal of test2, and then a string of bad, right? This, just like in C#, this could also be like a func, right? Where it calls another func.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? It gives you the exact same functional equivalence of, you are creating things for the kernel to call, and what it actually does underneath the covers and how deep it goes is just whatever tree you give it.
Okay. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Something I just realized, and I know you may want to move on, but
No, go for it.
just realizing this, so this actually runs at runtime, right? So you're actually calling your LLM to interpret this prompt at runtime.
Yep.
What are the chances it could give you a different result on different runtimes?
Every single time it could give you a different result.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in a
nuts.
sense, like this example, the one that I'm giving you is pretty simple, right? But like, it could give you a different one every single time.
But the thing to remember is, even though that there's some amount of randomness that is built into this, at the same time, it's also trying to reach a defined conclusion, right?
Yeah.
And so there's only so many
Satisfy
different
the
ways.
request.
Yeah, there's only
Yeah,
so many
that's-
ways it can satisfy the request and still end up on a valid solution. And so that's what, when you give it a JSON schema for the strongly typed stuff, it just starts chucking out options. It goes, well, that doesn't match, that doesn't match. Oh, I'm now left with only these handful of things. Okay, well, the top match is probably where it's gonna land.
And if you notice, this question doesn't have much opinion in it, right? This is extract data, put into a thing, right? If the function was instead, please summarize, right? If I had a summary property at the top of summarize this meeting and guess how it's gonna go, that specific property, very different probably every single time, right? That could be how it woke up in the morning, how it's feeling on this particular Tuesday, right? But a lot of the things here, there's not much opinion. It's just hard to do from code. Like, how would you say this could be parsed, but then also have this be parsed to the same data? That's hard code to, that would be impossible regex, right? But in a sense, it's like, from a human eye, this is pretty obviously the title with a very obvious speaker, right? So,
Sure.
okay, I'm gonna wrap up here, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about, as we end, my experience with this, because from a tooling side and from a how you use AI in your daily life as a coder, I feel like the more you use it, the better. A lot of the studies have come out that like there is a perceived kind of bump right at the beginning when you first start using AI of increased developer productivity is the term that they use. Like, it's not actual lines of code written. It's not those. It's like, how productive, how happy do you feel at the end of the day? Because right, everyone knows lines of code don't actually equate to real things. You could write tons of lines of code and all be crap. But there is an initial hump of like, oh, this is awesome. I just learned AI and all these things. But it kind of steadily drops off. But I do think, and based on what other people have said in the studies, it starts to rise once you become better at how you use it and where you inject yourself versus the AI. So if you haven't started using it, I would highly recommend it. It's going to be not only important, but also a fun exercise in kind of, it sharpens your eye for bad code, definitely. But I think it's important to start looking at how you can use it personally, because it's going to be different for everyone. And then from the other side of the development, it's really fun to do. There are some problems that just wouldn't even be thought of being approached before that have really cool solutions with AI. There are some really cool applications, and it's cool to see how it's being used, and it's only going to get cooler. So that's a little bit of a foray into .NET's AI tooling and how to use it. If you guys have more questions and you think of them later, shoot me an email or a Discord message. But thank you guys so much for coming.
Cool. Good talking.